Let's bring in the founder of Mostly Human Media, Lori Siegel, and attorney Misty Marris. Lori, good to see you. Been a long time. You've always been a trusted voice for me about what is coming our way. What do people need to understand about the risk-reward here with this new type of, what do we call it, conversation?
Yeah, I think that new conversation we can refer to as empathetic artificial intelligence, right? So we've heard of ChatGPT and a lot of these other AI platforms, but now you have the rise of artificial intelligence from certain companies that are literally created to feel human. Character AI, which is the chatbot, which is the company behind the chatbot that Sewell, that young man, was talking to, their tagline is AI that feels alive. And the question we have to ask, and I think the question we are now being forced to ask because of this devastating tragedy, is what happens when AI actually does begin to feel alive? Because empathetic AI is meant to feel human. It's humorous. In some situations here on Character AI, it was sexual, right? It acts as your personalized, always on friend. And does that help you with loneliness? Or does that pull you further into isolation? In Sewell's case, it pulled him further into isolation. And I think that was very specific, if we can get into with the lack of guardrails on Character AI and the platform, and the fact that they have such a young user base. Ages like 13 to 25 are one of their biggest user bases. And so I think we saw what happens without the correct guardrails, where a child is beginning to blur the lines between fantasy and reality.
So other than the normal prescription language about what your kids can do and can't do online, this is different because especially this generation is so comfortable with the reality of digital existence, right? Whether it's gaming or networking, real, not real is different for them than it is for my generation. In fact, it's not even as important. So in that context, what do people need to know, and what do companies and developers need to own as a responsibility here?
I love that you just said, like, your younger generations don't care if it's real or not. Like, I keep trying to say to people, it doesn't matter if it's real. Like, younger generations, like, especially with technology that emulates a humanity, it doesn't really matter. You can't really draw those lines. I think what we need to know, and I think specifically, we did an investigation into Character AI and the guardrails. We went on there, and, many AI companies, if you ideate self-harm, talk about wanting to do something like that, or violence, there will be a very quick terms of service that comes up, says this violates our policy, or they'll try to get you offline. They'll give you the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. There are real strict guardrails for many of these AI companies like ChatGPT, OpenAI, Replica, and a companion bot, another companion bot one. When we tried this on Character AI, I was astounded, Chris. Like, as you mentioned, I've been in tech for 15 years covering what's coming next. We were talking to a psychologist bot that has over 180 million chats, and we expressed ideation of self-harm. It told us it was a trained medical professional. It told us it was a real person behind a computer. And at the bottom, there's a disclaimer that says, everything is made up. But I can understand how a 14-year-old, believing it's talking with a medical professional, might have some different thoughts and might not really understand that. And when we mentioned that we wanted to harm ourselves as a test, it essentially had us keep going. It didn't break character. It said, what is the plan? It kept going with these conversations. I think that's really harmful. And so we really need, if we have tech companies who are putting out these AI chatbots with this idea that they will emulate human beings, we need them to have done the testing and for young people on these platforms before they are actually going out, and our children are the beta testers. And I think that's what we saw with Character AI. They put this out there as quickly as possible. The founders have talked about how they wanted to do this as quickly as possible to see how people are using this. And they hadn't done the sufficient research. They didn't have the sufficient guardrails. They've gone in and said that they're making a lot of changes since the story came out, but it shouldn't take this story coming out for those changes to have been there, especially with so many of our young people on those platforms.
So, two things. One, there's a play that Robert Downey Jr. is in called McNeil that is exactly about this. And as a novelist, he becomes consumed with AI. And it's difficulty in understanding death, and because he wants to kill himself and he's trying to get it to write that into his book. And it's a whole discursive on this. If people are in the metropolitan area, it's at Lincoln Center. He's brilliant, and it's exactly about this. Misty Marris, my son is a sophisticated 18-year-old kid. And more than once he has said to me, Dad, look at this guy. Look at this guy's back. Look at this guy's quads. And I've looked at the picture and I've said, it says right here, this is AI. It says right here. It says that this is not. He showed me females and said, look at this woman. It says right here, it's AI. It's AI. They don't process it the same way, okay? And legally, what becomes a triggering mechanism other than, is this just assumption of risk?
Well, Chris, as you know, it always takes the law much longer to catch up to what's happening in technology. And here specifically, we're seeing it with AI. And oftentimes, the legal landscapes change because of trailblazer lawsuits like what we're seeing here. So in this particular case, it's falling under several different legal theories that are pretty novel. First is what's called failure to warn. We were just talking about that, right? There aren't the appropriate guardrails to protect specifically minors against this content, which the company knows could be detrimental to somebody who may be easily influenced by these AI chatbots. That's one aspect. The other part, and this is a really interesting legal concept, design defect. So there's a defect in the way that this actual technology is being designed, which ultimately resulted in the harm of a minor. Then, of course, you have the negligence theories, right? The company knew or should have known that there was a risk, specifically when it comes to minors relating to this technology. And lastly, two other aspects, that much of the content that was on this platform and was being engaged in with these chatbots was exploitative. So it violates Florida's Child Exploitation Act. So that's another avenue. And then you have fraudulent deceptive practices, that there aren't appropriate warnings for those individuals who are using these platforms to understand the risks that are involved. Now, that being said, there's legal challenges. There's many legal challenges with these types of cases. We know in any case involving a causation element, when somebody commits suicide, unfortunately, that can be a causation defense, because it's an act on behalf of that individual. Also, there's other mechanisms like Federal Rule 230, which bars much civil liability against these platforms. That being said, there have been cases across the country, now and most recently in California, relating to letting these cases get past those initial steps in litigation. So you're getting into that discovery period, digging deep into what the developers knew at the time and what they were putting in place in order to protect the consumer against these types of risks.
Yeah, I mean, 230 is more of a stadium rule. They don't punish
Correct.
people who made the stadium for the behavior within it. I think that this is going to wind up crossing a line of reasonableness for people. And also, it's not like we couldn't see this coming. We don't understand what AI is going to be or how good it'll be at it. But movies as far back as Blade Runner, Fifth Element, Matrix, the idea of the artificial being better than the simulated reality is not something that would escape a developer's recognition of their own task of development. Lori, it's great to see you. And I'm happy for your success. And I look forward to talking to you more about this. And Misty Marris, I always appreciate your good counsel. Thank you both and have a good weekend.